All right, I'd like to say thank you very much, Tucson, for having me on your program. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to responding to the questions that you've developed and the few that I have as well. Again, I'm very appreciative to be part of this forum because these issues don't discuss that often, and it's very necessary for us to kind of come together and look at divergent views of what are common issues.
You must vote because people died for your right. How do you respond?
Tucson, in the 2020 election, I had a number of people that were calling me, that were pretty close to me, and they were saying, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote. And they were insisting I not vote for Trump. Later I found out the pressure was coming, I think, from their wives. And sometimes you can tell the people are watching a lot of TV, because when you watch TV, you tend to do what the TV tell you to do. And so, obviously, Trump was somebody that was being demonized, and blacks somehow thought that we had a dog in the race, and somehow we had to keep him from getting into the White House. And so, when I hear this, you must vote because people died for you to have this right, the first question I ask is, what am I voting for? In other words, are there any issues that are on the floor that are going to improve my quality of life? Or is this just an exercise in futility? And so, when I hear that, one of my friends was trying to pressure me into, oh, you got to vote. You can't vote for this idiot. We got to get Biden in, that type of thing. When I kept hearing that narrative, what came to my mind was, one of the guys told me, a close friend told me, he said, my grandmother told me that people died for us to have this right, and so if you don't do anything else, vote. And I said, well, my grandmother voted. She went to church. She did all those things a lot of our elders did, but she told us to think for ourselves. And so in doing that, we always respected whether somebody wanted to do something, not do something. There's no pressure, but you have to make up your own mind about things. And so the issue of voting, to me, has to be related to us as a people, as black people, identifying what this process is going to give us. Is it going to provide something tangible, or are we just reacting based upon theatrics, acting, whose personality appears to be the most racist, because they are all racist and they might practice different forms. When I looked at it, of course, I looked at President Trump and his father, Fred Trump, who practiced racist housing, discriminatory housing. Fred Trump owned all those units in New York City and became a multi-millionaire. And a lot of his properties, he did not want blacks in them, the father Trump. But then I look at somebody like Joe Biden, who's responsible for the 1986 anti-crime bill, where you had 100 to 1 sentencing for crack cocaine. Also sponsored in 1994 the 1986, the anti-drug abuse bill, 1994, the anti-crime bill, which turbocharged the criminal justice system. Well, who is he planning to put in those prisons? Is he turbocharged? He's planning to put his son Hunter in? I mean, Hunter's a known crackhead. He wasn't doing that. They found cocaine in the White House recently. And of course, the investigation came up. We don't know how it got there. I'm not saying it was him, but these laws are used to incarcerate black people. And that's exactly what has happened with them. So I look at that, and I look at beyond the personalities, because sometimes one racist can be branded and marketed as somehow being better than another racist, but I'm looking, what are they going to give me? How is this going to improve the quality of my life beyond what CNN, Fox, and anybody else is telling me or prompting me to think? President Biden got on the Breakfast Club and told Charlemagne the God one of the most offensive statements I've heard anyone make. He said, you're not black unless you vote for me. And I was like, wow, that is really arrogance. But with the choices that you have, I can see why they say that. What they don't want is for blacks to be alienated from the process. Whether you go elephant or whether you go donkey, they want you to be in there because they control both parts of it, which I'll talk more about later. So when I'm asked this question, you must vote because people died for you to have this right, we must make sure that they did not die in vain, and that somehow we're going to get something as a result of the votes. And in that vein, one of the most disturbing things I've discovered is that the United States is one of the few countries in the world that uses voting machines. Voting machines, there's a documentary called Hacking Democracy, which I'm surprised is still being sold on Amazon. Hacking Democracy documents, they go into a Florida county, and they show the guy that runs the elections of the county. He said, "Oh, these machines are true, and there's no way that they can be corrupted, and that type of thing, so on and so forth." And the woman that produced the documentary showed how a person could program the computer to give it whatever result that they want to give it. And they show how the guy took the memory card from the computer, and the memory card can give you whatever result you want. The question that was asked, they had about 5 or 6 people there, and they asked, "Do you think machines can be corrupted to give a false outcome election," something like that. Everybody except 1 or 2 people said, no, they don't. When the guy went in the other room and took the memory card out and put it back in, it said the answer was yes for most of those votes. And so that just showed right there, that was an empirical example of how a voting machine can give the results of whoever owns the software. Voting machines have proprietary software. They're not owned by that county or whoever the municipality given election. Most of them are owned by large corporations. They control they control electoral machines, the software to ensure the people they choose will be put in place. For instance, if you look in the past, Bush Cheney were in place to make 9/11 happen, and the plan for 2003, the Iraq War, was made in 2001. And so when the powers that be, the corporate structures, are able to program these machines to give whatever results that they want, that makes sure that they'll have the people in place that they need to effect whatever changes they want, whether it's 9/11 or whether it's coronavirus or whatever. So getting back to the question, we really need to look at these. There's no way to really check the results. They even discourage exit polls. See, exit polls is a good way of being able to maybe determine, after you talk to people, the sampling of people, is what we're told the result, the actual result. And this country has done everything it can to keep people from trying to validate and verify the results of elections, because they don't want people thinking that somehow the vote didn't count or it was discarded. And was it 2000? What was the election when there was the impropriety involving Bush and Al Gore, the vice president?
That was either 2000 or 2004, one of those two.
When they discarded those, that just shows that was the most obscene example, because now the examples are a little more subtle. Because in Florida, the Secretary of State was the person that ran Jeb Bush's campaign. Jeb Bush, the president's brother, was the governor of Florida. And Mrs. Harris was the one that oversaw the electoral process, and of course, they allowed the votes to be discarded, which were Mexicans and blacks that were voting. They talk about hanging charge. We can't tell what they intended, because whenever you have a vote, you just want to know what the intention of the person that voted was. Who did they intend to pick? And the process is supposed to be honoring that. And so they discarded all those votes. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case. When the Congressional Black Caucus went into the Senate, because if there were any type of a tie that the Senate has can be broken by the vice president. Al Gore was vice president. When they came in there, Congressional Black Caucus, to raise the issue of the voting improprieties in Florida and to say that this was election fraud, Al Gore threatened to call the Capitol Police on the Congressional Black Caucus to have them arrested. Why? Because he knew that there was a coup. He knew that he probably should have won, but backdoor they made an agreement where this is how it's going to be. The powers that be said, you're not going to be president. It's going to be Bush.